Washington Journal continues.
And Senator Roger Wicker joins us now, Republican of Mississippi. Senator, you're also a senior member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I want to get your take on this VA reform bill deal that was announced yesterday that we've been talking about this morning.
Well, I think most members will vote for it. We're not totally delighted with every aspect of it, particularly the way it's paid for. But, you know, when you get Bernie Sanders elected on the socialist ticket in Vermont, and Jeff Miller, a conservative Republican chairman in the House, to come up with an agreement, there's going to be some compromise and some give and take. And I think basically this is a package that most members, House and Senate, will support, and it'll go forward and be a strong statement that we value the contributions of our veterans, and we're going to do what we're going to take this step to see if that alleviates the problems that we've had, particularly with access.
$17 billion for this, about $5 billion that's offset here. Are there ways down the road to find more offsets?
Well, I certainly hope so. But like I say, this is what we can get done this week, and it's important that we get it done this week. We're also going to confirm Secretary McDonald probably today. And I think we'll be looking to his leadership for some other suggestions there. But this is a step we can take. It's paid for, but it's not paid for in the way I'd like to see it paid for. So that's why we meet year round, and we can look at this in the future.
Any concerns about the exodus of veterans out of the VA under this legislation, and that cost commitment if a large numbers of veterans decide to go that private care route, and the commitments to paying for that private care?
Well, I think the cost concerns always need to be looked at, but the veteran is paramount, and when there's a long waiting period, and under our government-run health care system that the VA system is, if the veteran cannot be taken care of, I think he or she need to get to a doctor and be taken care of. That's paramount. And so if it gets to be too costly, we'll go back and look at it. But to me, a key part of this legislation is the opt-out and the ability of the veteran not to stay on that waiting list and get the care they need.
And on that idea of opting out and using private providers is a subject that both Senator Sanders and Congressman Miller talked about yesterday. Here's a bit of what they had to say about it.
Okay.
I don't believe that there will be a flight of all of the veterans out of the system, but we don't know until we start this program to see how veterans are actually going to act. And this first year is going to give us a good benchmark with which to be able to set the future of this program forward. The other thing I think that we all agree on is that one of the important things in our bill was to have a commission that would go through and independently look at the Department of Veterans Affairs from top to bottom. The VA will tell us they need more money and more people, but what they won't do is help us understand what efficiencies can be found within the system. Are doctors seeing patients as they should? Is their space being used adequately? Do they need to close and only see people during the normal business hours? So there are a lot of things that we're going to find out in the next year that hopefully will change the way VA delivers health care.
And let me just add to that. I agree with what the chairman said. In addition, we hope that with more doctors and nurses and space coming in, the VA system itself will be able to accommodate more veterans in a timely manner. Yes, sir.
Congressman Miller saying that we don't know until we allow this option how many people are going to use that opt-out. Does that concern you?
I think they both have excellent points. And let me tell you, I'm very comfortable with Jeff Miller being in the leadership on this. He is a tough conservative, a fiscal hawk. And I think he will look to the information that is going to be provided by this commission, and I think we will find efficiencies. I think Senator Sanders makes a good point. With the additional doctors, with the additional facilities, we would hope the waiting list will be shorter, and there will be fewer veterans opting out. So, I mean, obviously, with the money that is going to be expended, we would certainly hope the waiting lists are much, much shorter. So I'm comfortable, particularly with Jeff Miller presiding in the House and making sure that we've got some savings there and some efficiencies. I think we can achieve those.
Switching tracks for a second, another vote that will be watched this week in the Senate, that border bill vote that's taking place. According to the Hill newspaper, Senator Harry Reid has set up that vote for later this week on a bill to provide $2.7 billion in emergency border funding. He filed cloture on the motion to proceed to that, setting up a likely vote on Wednesday. What's your take on what will happen in that vote?
I don't think there will be 60 votes for cloture on $2.7 billion, and I do not think the House of Representatives will go that high. I think we can work with the leadership on about $1 billion, which is enough, I think, to address the immediate border crisis. And beyond that, I'd be surprised if you got the $2.7 billion, and I would not at all be inclined to vote for that.
What do you think is going to happen before Congress adjourns for the August recess? Can a $1 billion deal happen this week?
It seems to me unlikely the way the leader is proceeding. I mean, here it is Tuesday, and I understand Harry Reid wants to get us out of here Thursday night. He's going to have to do some fast maneuvering to negotiate something that would gain a majority vote in the House and Senate.
We're talking with Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, here to take your comments and questions for about the next 35 minutes or so on the Washington Journal. Our phone lines are open. Democrats, 202-585-3880. Republicans, 202-585-3881. Independents, 202-585-3882. A lot of issues being wrapped up in the final week here before Congress adjourns. We'll start with Terry calling in from Denton, Texas, on our line for Democrats. Terry, good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm rated 100% total and permanent disabled with the VA. And last year I went down to the Dallas hospital down there, and I was getting x-rayed. And the technician asked me who the lady was that was with me. It was my daughter. And I told him that, she always takes care of me and gives me rides down to the VA when I have to go. And he said, well, how well is she going to take care of you when they cut off your money? Because I do get a disability check every month. And it went on from there. The head shrink lady that I work with up here in Denton, she told me the same thing. And the Republican House cut all the money coming to the disabled veterans. And President Obama, no matter what everybody says, did sign an executive order and restore that money, or I would have just been up the creek.
Senator Wicker, do you want to respond to the situation?
That is not at all the way I remember the legislation. As I understand it, Terry, you're saying that the Congress cut off all the money going to disabled veterans. That would have taken legislation passed by the Democratic Senate and the Republican House and signed by the President of the United States. I think we're a little bit inaccurate on the facts stated there. And I do say this: I think it's probably wrong for healthcare advisors and providers to be getting into politics and policy like that. To me, their job is to provide care and to take care of the case as needed and not get into advocacy. That would be my response. It might be, if you want to talk specifically to your own U.S. Congressman or United States Senator, I think they'd be able to help you with your perception that all VA funding was cut off. That is not my understanding at all.
Let's go to Frank, who's waiting in Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, on our line for Independence. Frank, you're on with Senator Roger Wicker.
How you doing? I'm 100% VA too, like the previous person. And my only complaint with the VA is that when you have a situation where, say, you cut yourself, or you have a rash, or you have a cold and you want to see the general practitioner, they'll tell you we can't get you in until next month. And they'll say if you really need some assistance, you have to go to the emergency room, which is like 60 miles away. And then when you get there, it's a whole day affair to sit there. I think the idea of letting vets go to general practitioners when they have acute situations that have to be taken care of is a lot better than them having to hop in their car and drive 60, 70 miles and stand around. If you could do something about that, I think that's the main complaint from a lot of vets. I mean, once you get into the specialty field and you're seeing specialists, it's basically the same as on the outside. So you get the care you need, but it's the acute care where you need it, that day or within a couple of days. That's when the VA falls flat on their face.
Well, Frank, that's a very helpful analysis. And I think people like you are going to be very pleased with the progress that we make this week, because I do think there'll be more of an opportunity for people like you to be seen by the acute provider, and then to go the outside route if that's not available within a reasonable period. So I hope you're satisfied with that. Do let us know how it works 6 months from now, and I think that's part of what Chairman Miller was talking about. Once the legislation's in place, we're also going to do some oversight and see how it works. But I do think you'll be pleased with this approach, because it's exactly what you're talking about, Frank.
And to our line for Republicans, Pat's waiting in Long, South Carolina. Pat, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Pat.
Good morning. Thank you for C-SPAN. I would like to ask him, where is the money coming from? The government, Congress's answer to every problem is throw the money out there. We're $17 trillion in debt. I believe wholeheartedly that vets should be taken care of. My husband is a vet. But, if you would put somebody in there to really look, you probably could find the waste right in the VA to pay for this. Why do y'all always just want to pay your way out? Why can't you fix the problems? Thank you.
Well, I think the caller makes an excellent point, and as John points out, a portion of the bill will be paid for by offsets, by cutting other expenditures in other parts of the budget. I think the longer term question is what Pat is talking about, and Roger Wicker, United States Senator from Mississippi, has voted for the Paul Ryan budget. It makes tough choices in our entitlement programs, slowing the growth in the first decade and out years also. That's the way we're going to address the $17 trillion plus national debt that we have. But to answer your question, I would have preferred to have honest pay-fors for the entire $17 billion. I've got to make a choice, and I've made a choice by the end of this week to vote for a bill that is not exactly what I want, but that's partially offset by pay-fors.
We talked about VA, we talked about border issues. As we mentioned, Roger Wicker, also a member of the Armed Services Committee. I want to get your take on the latest in Ukraine and the expected sanctions coming down from both the EU and likely the U.S. as well.
Well, we have encouraging news from our European allies just yesterday. After some reluctance on their part, there has been an agreement among our European allies for stronger sanctions against Russia, and I certainly think they're coming based on the fact that Mr. Putin has taken really some of the most outrageous actions that have occurred in Europe really since the 1930s. Certainly a gross violation of the Helsinki Final Act, which was adopted in 1975. Every single tenet of the Helsinki Act, all 10, were violated by Vladimir Putin with his incursion into Crimea and the interference in Ukraine. And I think what prompted the Europeans yesterday finally to agree on this package of sanctions is the clear evidence that the Russian leadership is continuing to be involved with these military separatists in eastern Ukraine, and it's something that needs to stop. And if it doesn't, they're going to. I think we've now shown they're going to really. Some of the most outrageous actions that have occurred in Europe really since the 1930s. Certainly a gross violation of the Helsinki Final Act, which was adopted in 1975. Every single tenet of the Helsinki Act, all 10, were violated by Vladimir Putin with his incursion into Crimea and the interference in Ukraine. And I think what prompted the Europeans yesterday finally to agree on this package of sanctions is the clear evidence that the Russian leadership is continuing to be involved with these military separatists in eastern Ukraine, and it's something that needs to stop. And if it doesn't, they're going to. I think we've now shown there are going to be serious consequences for Mr. Putin and his fellow countrymen.
As we noted, Secretary Kerry is meeting with Ukraine's foreign minister this morning at about 10:15. What do you make of how he's handled himself in both Ukraine and also what's happening in Israel and Gaza?
I'm very disappointed in the Secretary of State, and I have a lot of company in that respect. And of course, he represents administration policy, no question about it. I don't think anybody in a responsible position in Washington, D.C. Would have advocated the United States becoming militarily involved with helping the Ukrainian democracy resist the Russians. I think that's something that simply could not have been attained. We didn't have the capability or stomach to do that. But there were so many ways that we could have helped Ukraine with assistance, with arms, and instead, you know, it's the meals ready to eat and first aid kits and things like that. So I'm disappointed with the lack of giving the Ukrainians the ability to defend themselves. And then just, I think your question also it sort of looks at a larger foreign policy failure on the part of the administration. I brought a column from yesterday's Washington Post by Fred Hyatt entitled "An Experiment Gone Wrong," and I'll just quote a line or two. A stunning unfolding of international crises from Iraq to Ukraine to Syria to Gaza has prompted some less than edifying Washington debate. Mr. Hyatt says, for Mr. Obama, things like the tumult in Egypt and elsewhere was a distraction, not a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Mr. Hyatt suggests that when ordinary citizens in Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, and elsewhere unexpectedly began agitating for democracy, the West might have responded as it did after World War II with the Marshall Plan, or after the fall of the Berlin Wall with a commitment to a Europe whole and free, but the Obama administration did not have the stomach to do that. And so I think we're seeing a crumbling of our foreign policy in all of those areas. And basically, I think it seems to the man on the street in the United States, and to me, this particular United States senator, that the world is going up in flames, and American leadership has been absent there.
That Fred Hyatt column in yesterday's Washington Post, the headline, "An Experiment Gone Wrong." We're talking with Senator Roger Wicker, joins us for about the next 25 minutes or so. We'll get to as many of your calls as we can. We'll start with Bill in Danville, Illinois, on our line for Independence. Bill, good morning.
Good morning. Senator, my thoughts on this, every time they take this money out of the Congress for the VA, they want to cut back on the veterans' disability benefits. What's your thought on that?
Well, I would be opposed to that, and that's not part of this legislation.
All right, thank you.
So let me give you that assurance.
And Tori is in Edgard, Louisiana, on our line for Democrats. Tori, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
My comments are, here in Louisiana, it's taken a long time for our VA hospital to be built. But I could say one thing about our VA here, especially with our outpatient clinic here in St. John Parish. We have one of the best with Dr. Delott and her staff there. Really fantastic. But the only problem that we have here in Louisiana is just basically the scheduling. They don't take too much precedence here in New Orleans of making sure the vets getting the proper scheduling. If they can take more, like the money that y'all putting out, if they can go ahead on and use that money to go ahead and train some of the facilities, or take some of these facilities like here in St. John and use them as a model of how a VA should be, a VA should be ran, I think we'll come out with a better understanding of how veterans work. Our mental health here is fantastic with the outpatient, and that's just a small clinic. And for them to have much care, I think, Congress would be better. The best person I ever had work with me is Senator David Vitter. He's a fantastic person, and I tell you, if we had more people like yourself and David Vitter that's behind the veterans, I think we'd be better off.
Well, I appreciate that call coming in on the Democratic line, and I'll be sure when I see Senator Vitter later on today to pass along that compliment. I think the caller makes some very good points. He's very happy with specific care that he's received, and Tori, I think you're complimenting the mental health facility there. There are a lot of things in the VA health system that are being done right. I got some information from a Texas clinic just a few days ago, particularly in the mental health and substance abuse area, where the people are very, very high on the job that is being done there. So let's not paint everybody with the same brush. The caller mentions infrastructure delays, and certainly there's always a bureaucracy there, which frustrates us in getting buildings and also bridges and highways constructed. And I think if we can address with the legislation the backlog, improvements will be made. And again, we're going to do oversight and try to make sure that the bill has the intended result.
Earlier in this segment, you mentioned some concern with healthcare professionals straying into the policy realm with their patients. Brian writes in on our Twitter page, not true, Senator Wicker. As healthcare professionals, we are encouraged to advocate for the best interest of our clients.
I think that's fine, but I think when they start saying that Congress has passed legislation that's going to disadvantage you, to me, you're getting over into advocacy there. And crossing that line. But that's a matter of opinion.
Let's go to Joan waiting in Rockville, Maryland on our line for Independence. Joan, good morning.
Good morning. It would be very good to improve the congressional oversight of the VA, and I was wondering about a special inspector general like Philip Bowen in Iraq and Neil Barofsky of the SIG-TARP, who would report directly to Congress and provide access in the same legislation for the vets to have access to these special inspector generals. The second thing I would like to mention is the role of unions. I saw very briefly Betsy McCoy before Congress, and she was saying that there are from one union alone, there are 300 workplace rules. We have to get the cost of the VA down. That's an expensive kind of care. And also we have to be able to fire not only high-level people, but snippy secretaries who refuse to give vets appointments that they need when they're being referred out to other specialists out of the VA.
Senator Wicker, on unions and special inspector generals.
Okay, I think Betsy McCoy, as she refers to as a former lieutenant governor of New York, I very much appreciate that insight that she provides there. And there should be, I think, an easier way to hire and fire, and particularly to terminate people who, as the caller suggests, are not there with the best interests of the patient, and treat the patients callously and not as clients and customers, which deserve the best. With regard to a special IG, you're not going to find that in this legislation, I don't believe, although the department certainly has inspectors general that can report to us. There will be oversight, and in the clip that was shown, Chairman Miller mentioned the commission that will report back, and if that's not sufficient, then I think the suggestion of a special inspector general might be well taken. But the caller makes some very good points, which I very much appreciate.
To Lancaster, Kentucky, on our line for Republicans, Charles is next. Charles, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I've got a lot of questions.
Got time for just one or two, Charles, and turn your TV down and just go ahead with your question.
Okay, my biggest question is this.
Go ahead, Charles. Turn your TV down.
Okay. I'm working on it. No, it's down to 0. My biggest question is, why do the Marines that served in Beirut and Grenada have absolutely zero benefits from VA when we lost so many Marines in one day?
Okay, you're saying that Marines who served in Beirut and in the incursion into Grenada do not have benefits. I'd be surprised if that were 100% accurate. Let me ask you to do this. You may want to contact your own representative in Kentucky, but if not, you can call my office and we will run that issue down specifically on a casework basis. But veterans who served should be eligible regardless of where they serve. So let me see if I can run that down, and if you'll call my office, we will check that out. But it may be you want to call Senator McConnell or Senator Paul about that, since they represent you specifically.
Do you want to respond to Roy on Twitter talking about the issue of Ukraine and the crisis on the border? Republicans are predictable. Money for arming of Ukraine, but not so much for the Republican-declared border crisis. That's incredible.
Well, we're for addressing the border crisis also, and the fact of the matter is these minors, these young Central American children, should be returned to their families. An incorrect signal has been sent from this government that if you send your child to the Mexico-Texas border, they'll be allowed to come in and enjoy the good life here in the United States of America. We cannot afford, from an infrastructure standpoint, to take care of the flood of immigrants that would occur if that signal continues to be sent out. I think these children are victims of some purveyors of false information down there in their own countries, and they need to be reunited with their families. Now, we can adjudicate quickly once an adjudication has been made that these children are not, for example, victims of human trafficking or something like that. Then I think a 3 or 4 day turnaround can be done. Perhaps some extra judges are needed for that. And for way less than the president is asking, we could put them all on a first-class plane ride back to their native cities and return them to their families. And we can do that for far less than the president is asking.
And a major front for that crisis on the border is Texas. Shirley is calling in from Claiborne, Texas, on our line for Independent. Shirley, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Shirley.
I've got 2 questions. First of all, I'd like to kudos for taking care of these children that are here because of false information, regardless of who it came from. But my main question is, if you're going to give Border Patrol 2.7 or 1 billion, it doesn't matter. What we need is to know how that money is going to be spent and how well it's going to contain that border. And I'd like for you to answer that, and I'd also like to find out how soon these children are going to be able to be returned to their parents, and what's going to happen to those that have been abused and have the problems.
And Shirley, I'll let Senator Wicker explain that, just to give you some information on that bill that's going to be on the floor in the Senate, or at least the bill that Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's trying to move in the Senate. The $2.7 billion border proposal would include $1.2 billion for child care services, $1.1 billion for border security and deportation, $50 million for legal services for migrant children, and then a few other items thrown in there, including $615 million for emergency wildfire suppression and $225 million for Israel's anti-missile defense system. But Senator Wicker, I'll let you respond.
Okay, that last item is Iron Dome, and it really is something everybody supports. But to think that we're going to pass a $2.7 billion bill in the name of immigration just so we can adequately fund Iron Dome is something that we're not going to do. If you could go back to the first line on that, the child care services, those are long-term child care services that would last much longer than the very short period of time I'm advocating. And I think the caller makes a very good point, and I appreciate you doing it. And it's the reason that I've never been willing to support comprehensive immortgation reform as it has come to the floor of the Senate, is because we don't adequately take care of the border. We don't. I've never been convinced that anything proposed would seal our borders and prevent another huge flood of immigrants coming over. And so the point is made very well. We need to protect the border, whether it's electronic fence or completing the fence in the areas where it can be done physically. And once we do that, then I think possibly Shirley and I will be convinced that we can do some sort of comprehensive immigration reform. But that border has got to be sealed with a wall or a fence or an electronic fence, first of all.
Nashville, Georgia is next. Daryl is calling on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning, C-SPAN. How you doing?
Good. Daryl, go ahead.
Good morning to the senator also.
Good morning, Daryl.
I'm a veteran myself, and I spent some time at Delta Storm and other places. And I remember when I came home, I was going to the VA Center up in Atlanta, and I was seeing this councilman guy, and he just blew me off, so I stopped going. But to make my story short is that I'm a person that child PTSD myself, and I want to say that Lake City, Florida, the place that I go to, the VA Center, I go to, that is a good place. They got for the veterans. They make sure that your appointment being made, and I also get my medicine from there. I run out of medicine. I make a phone call. They send my medicine and stuff. That is the VA Center in Lake City, Florida is a very good VA Center.
Daryl, not the first caller calling in today to talk about the VA Center
music
in their area.
To my ears. A VA hospital that the client and the customer and the patient is pleased with. So I'm sorry for the earlier unpleasant incident where you were kind of blown off and not treated as you should have been. Thank you for your service. This is the reason we're trying to improve the situation, and I hope what we do this week will help the situation and can be done in a cost-effective basis that will eventually save us some money.
About 10 minutes left with Senator Wicker. Zach's up next in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, on our line for Democrats. Zach, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
I'm also an 11-year Air Force vet.
I'm an Air Force vet myself.
Well, congratulations, sir. Perfect choice. I guess my biggest gripe is just going into this thing. When Bush took us to war, and they fired the Asian general. I can't remember his name. He wound up heading the VA for a few moments under the Obama administration. But what he tried to tell them then is that the numbers were going to be higher. And that, in my opinion, that's where the crux of this problem starts.
Zach, are you talking about the numbers of vets who have been affected, or the number in terms of the cost of fixing it?
I was talking about the number of vets that were going to be, a number of troops we were going to need for the whole Iraq campaign.
Okay.
You know, I mean, because if you start with a false number of your casualties, then everything else is false.
You know what I mean? Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about, and what the point Zach is making is that that General Shinseki was then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and basically he cautioned President Bush that the entire cost in terms of dollars and manpower of going into Iraq was going to be heavier. It was going to be more costly to the United States than some people were suggesting. So the point is made over and over again. I will say this: I do feel though that that our involvement in Iraq could have been a stabilizing moment in the entire Middle East, and we blew that opportunity when we didn't negotiate a status of forces agreement, when this administration didn't negotiate a status forces agreement with the Maliki administration. We didn't insist that we leave 15,000 troops there, which would have prevented this whole ISIS fiasco from occurring, in my judgment, and in the judgment of many of the generals who've spoken, particularly the retired or retiring generals, who don't have to worry about repercussions. This did not have to happen, and so I think clearly General Shinseki had a point to make, and I appreciate people speaking truth to power, as he did. I would hope there's some people in the Pentagon today that are looking at the disaster in Iraq and speaking to the administration saying, let's do not make the same mistake in Afghanistan that we made in Iraq. Let's listen to the tribal council, the Loya Jirga. Let's listen to the two new presidential candidates, one of whom will take office in a few weeks. And let's leave a residual force there that will prevent the kind of disaster that we've now seen in Iraq and in surrounding countries.
As the senator mentioned, served in the Air Force and Air Force Reserve, retired from the reserves in 2004 with the rank of lieutenant colonel, and he's with us for about the next 5 minutes or so. Let's go to Frank, waiting in Memphis, Tennessee, on our line for Independence. Frank, good morning.
Hey, how you doing this morning?
Good, Frank.
Hey, listen, my only problem, VA take good care of their vets, you know. Only problem it really is just overcrowded. You know, you don't have enough doctors. That's the main problem. They take good care of vets. You just don't have enough doctors for the vets to be seen. You have one doctor might have 200-300 patients. So that's really the problem. It's really not they don't take good care. They take good care of vets. You just don't have enough doctors. And my second point is this, you know, I hear the Senator Collins and mention Obama about everything, but we in the community, in black community, we do not think of nothing about foreign policy as far as they spending all that money for Ukraine, Iraq, giving these people all that money. And then when it comes to the communities that y'all do not wish to give any kind of money to the communities, do you think that we rather have the money spent on immigrants, or do you think we'd rather have money spent on refugees in Egypt, Iraq, You can't. Y'all talking about sending money over there for weapons and stuff. Send that money over here for the people in the United States so we can take care of the immigrants that come here. You know, really the reason the senators don't want the immigrants to come here because they think they're going to vote Democrat. That's the main reason. We got money to spend for all the other countries.
Senator Wicker, let you respond.
Well, okay, there's a balancing act that we have to do, and I do think that there has to be a substantial amount of money spent on defense and foreign policy, and a lot of our security funds do go to support our troops and our security overseas. That doesn't mean that we can't take care of veterans, that we can't invest money in programs that provide jobs domestically also. So I think I don't think it's an either-or situation. The first point that you were making, Frank, is exactly what this legislation is talking about. And actually, I live in North Mississippi, and a lot of my neighbors go to the VA hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. So thank you. A recurring theme, we're hearing compliments about the service they're getting. But this legislation provides more doctors, more nurses, and more facilities to address just what you're talking about.
And the last caller in this segment is Tony from North Providence, Rhode Island, on our line for Independence. Tony, we got about a minute here.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for C-SPAN. Took me about 6 months to get through. I've got a claim in with the injury that I got during my service time, and I've been going through heck with them. I finally got a meeting with a judge. I told the judge exactly what was going on, how they were treating me, and I had to keep telling them no, and claim and prove everything from A to Z. I even had to prove that I served. That's how bad it got. How do I go around and try to get a hold of these people? This is going on 6 years.
Okay, well, you have a right to an attorney, but I would suggest this is a casework matter. If I were you, I would call my local congressman and get them involved. I dare say at the district office of either your senator or your representative, there is a person there who can help you work through this particular issue and get you an adjudication a lot more promptly than you're being treated right now.
Senator Wicker, that's all the time we have in this segment. Appreciate you joining us this morning on the Washington Journal.
Thank you.